Hi, and welcome to Talks with Shay. So today I would like to begin with reading from Proverbs chapter 15 and verse 1. And it says, "A soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger." So today, for the new month of October, I would like to title this series Boundaries. So for part one of Boundaries, I would like to talk to you about family. So when I'm talking about boundaries, I'm talking about good boundaries and bad boundaries. Let me put it like this: healthy and unhealthy boundaries, because there's a difference. Some boundaries in our lives are good and some are not. So a few months ago, I read a book called Boundaries, and it literally changed my life. And so I figured I would share that information with you all because it was so life changing and it helped me realize a lot of things in my life that I needed to change. When we grow up, our parents or grandparents, like my grandmother raised me, have rules, and so then when we have to follow those rules and things like that. Well, then when we grow up to be adults and have children, a lot of times the way we were raised, we tend to raise our children. And it's not always the right way or the healthy way to raise them. So a lot of times we don't look at it as a change and we'll be like, well, that's how they raised me, so that's how I have to do my child. But who said that that is the right way? It's not always the right way. And so we have to look at boundaries in our lives and realize that this is actually not a healthy thing. I think back to like a few months ago, I was in therapy and my therapist asked me, she said, "Shalonda," we were talking about boundaries, and she said, "Can you name a time that your grandmother told you no?" And I sat there and I was like, no, because I really couldn't, right? And so she said, "Well, is there a time she should have told you no when she didn't?" And I was like, boop, yes. Now, boop, yes. I'm like, oh, started thinking of all kind of things, and I'm like, oh my God, yes. And so she said, "Name that time. Name one." And so I said, well, I didn't have a driver's license, and I would ask to use the car, and she would allow me to take the car with no license. And I was something else back in the day. Thank the Lord for change. But I would say I was going one place and where somewhere else and in a whole nother city. And so, it's just things like that versus the healthy boundary in place would have been, I'm going to bring you where you're going because you don't have a driver's license, right? But because she never wanted to tell me no, I always got whatever I wanted. So my therapist asked that hard question. She said, "Shalonda, did you think that was healthy?" And I was like, wow. I was like, it wasn't. And she said it wasn't. And so I'm like, okay. So now the thing as an adult that I have to deal with that's hard for me is rejection. Because growing up, grandmother gave me everything I wanted, everything I asked for. If she didn't have it, she found it, whatever, spoiled, rotten. But what happened as an adult, when rejection comes into my life, it hurts so bad because I'm not used to somebody telling me no. I'm so used to getting my way, and now as an adult, I can't have everything my way. The speed limit outside ain't my way, and the list goes on and on. So sometimes now I take it personal. So now I'm starting to look at rejection in another light. I don't know if you can relate to that story or not, but that's just one example. For example, some of the things that the book talked about, like it said, respond, don't react. A lot of times we ask somebody something and then it's like, if we don't like it, we might react to it instead of respond to it. And it's a difference. instead of opening up and sharing with somebody what you're feeling. If they're asking you to go do something and inside you really don't want to do it, is that uncomfortable feeling, but you don't want to hurt that person's feeling, and so you just tend to do it because, well, that's my family. My family means well, so I'm gonna just do it. That's what family do for each other. But that's not always right. And so what we're doing is we're causing unhealthy boundaries right there in that relationship with our family, because you don't want to hurt the person because that's your family member. Families have each other back and this and that. So I don't mind making that sacrifice. And if we're not careful, what we do is, instead of putting that healthy boundary and say, you know what, I just don't feel like it. And they need to respect that. We don't do that because we don't want to deal with the friction it might cause on them saying, well, I'm family, I did this, or throw back in your face what they've done for you and you can't do this for me. But it's all about having healthy boundaries. And what we need to learn to do, even if it is our family and we're not comfortable with something, we need to just tell them. And if it's us on the other side and they're telling us no, we need to accept the no that they're giving us and say, you know what, it's okay, because that's how you feel. But instead, sometimes people are not honest, with their feelings. Say, for example, if you're in a relationship with your spouse or significant other, you, in the beginning of those relationships, it's like honeymoon, right? Everybody's getting along, it's all in love, and all this kind of stuff. And so you tend to maybe say you'll deal with something when really deep down inside you really don't want to deal with it. And then it comes up later as a problem. Because in the beginning, when they mention it, instead of you tell that funny feeling you was getting, you was like, I think I could sacrifice that for them because I love them so much, or because I like them so much that that might run them off. And then we get scared of losing somebody in a relationship to where we're not open and honest about our feelings. But you know what happens later? When that stuff comes up, then the attitudes come up. And then it's like, where that came from? You said you didn't have a problem with it then, but now you have a problem with it. And so it's like, ooh, unhealthy boundaries. Because that, ooh, you felt no to say, you never said it because you was afraid for what it would do to the other person. We as adults have to get to a place where we have healthy boundaries in our lives with our families. Because if not, it trickles down. You think about it. If you grew up with unhealthy boundaries, raise your children like that with unhealthy boundaries, then when they have children, it just keeps going down and down. And what happens is a generational curse upon the family. Because nobody took a stand to put healthy boundaries in place that needed to be put in place. A lot of times now that like they say, my eyes have been open to the difference between unhealthy boundaries and healthy boundaries. I look at situations now and I'm like, and I'm talking about within my family, and I'd be like, that's not even healthy. And what people tend sometimes to do is they'll say, well, I don't mind making that sacrifice. That's not what it's about. Because then you want to try to keep your unhealthy boundaries and make it seem like you're doing something good because it's not about you, it's about them. But there's a time when it has to be about you, because if you don't really want to do it, like they say, out of your heart, then what you're doing is really not a genuine action that you're providing, or act, I should say, to someone else, because deep down inside, you really don't want to do it. So if you don't want to do it, then don't do it. It's all about how you say it to somebody to make them respect what you're saying, and when you give them that no. Don't just be like, I'm not doing that. No, you could do that. I'm not doing that. Or don't pass judgment. No, you do stuff like that. Or I don't do stuff like that. That's not, then you're passing judgment on a person. We have to be careful that when we're saying, no, I'd rather not do it, just be honest. Be gentle with your answer and say, you know what? I'm not comfortable with this. I'm sorry. And it's okay. Even saying I'm sorry. No, we shouldn't even apologize for how we feel. Let me rewind that part, because we shouldn't be sorry for the boundaries that we're putting in place in our lives. No, the answer is no. I'm just not comfortable with that. Maybe ask someone else, and they may be comfortable. And it's up to that person to respect the boundaries that you're putting in place. Another thing that I wrote down that I thought was so good in that book, and I'm going to quote it for you. It says, people who own their lives don't feel guilty when they make choices about where they are going. And that's the truth. It's your life. You should not feel guilty about choices that you have to make in your life because it's where you're going. It's your destiny. It's your life. You have to live through it. You know what I mean? And so we have to look at our families and say, you know what? I grew up like this, but I don't know if that was even the right way. Times have changed. I'm 44, about to be 45 in a few weeks. And I look back and it's like the way that children grow up now to back then is so different. Back then, anybody could have whipped your child. The neighbor across the street, you know, whoever. Nowadays, you better not whip nobody else's children. If they're going to come to school. I see somebody got arrested for that. Went to school and beat up on a child. Like, you know, the time now is just so different. My point is, we have to make sure that we put those healthy boundaries now in our lives. Stop leaning on what happened in the past, how we was raised, and look at now where you are and how you're raising your children and the relationships that you have with your family in your life right now. Put those healthy boundaries. Be honest about what you feel, and when you feeling no, it's okay to say no. And that's what we have to be okay with. Okay with saying no. You know, even in that book, it even talked about if you tell someone no and they don't respond, it's not your fault. It's their fault. If they don't respond in a good way, it was saying like, if you ask me to do something and I say, no, I don't think I'm going to do that. And then you get upset with me, that's not my problem. It's your problem. Because I'm putting healthy boundaries in my life and you have to respect those boundaries. So, I don't know what your family is like, whether you're raising your children grown and gone or whatever, may not even have kids like me. So I don't have kids, but I look at putting healthy boundaries with those family members that's close to me in my life. And that's what we need to aim to do. When we feel a no, be okay with saying no, and it's okay. And they have to learn to respect that. And then they're going to know, well, I'm not going to ask them that because, you know, they're not going to want to do that. They'll second guess asking you, but do it out of love, with a gentle spirit, and do it with a good heart. Because that people receive a lot better than somebody that's screaming at them and everything else. One of the other things that it said bad boundaries. A bad boundary is when your relationship with one person affects your relationship with others. Bad boundaries. Because one person has nothing to do with others. What you have issues with one person shouldn't be bled into another relationship with someone else. We have to build those healthy relationships in our lives. And the only way we can do that is to have healthy boundaries. So, before I go, I just want to remind you, if you haven't already, check out my website at www.talkswithshay.org. You can subscribe to my videos on YouTube and find me on Facebook. Like my page, share my page. Invite your friends to like my page. And until next time with Talks with Shay, Shay is out. Y'all be blessed.